Welcome to the First Right Podcast, your weekly dose of conservative news brought to you by Restoration of America. I'm your host, Hayden Ludwig, Research Director for Restoration News. You can find our work at restoration-news.com. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, yet it's being infringed upon every day. Left unchecked, Americans could soon find themselves disarmed by a government that no longer regards them as citizens, but subjects. Here to talk gun rights is Dianna Muller, a retired Tulsa police officer and founder of Women for Gun Rights. Dianna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about Women for Gun Rights, how you founded it, what your objectives are.
Well, I'm a retired police officer. I'm a professional shooter. And one day I happened to be in Washington, D.C., and a friend of mine said, "Do you want to meet your legislator?" And I was probably like 90% of Americans, very apathetic towards politics, really didn't pay attention. And I begrudgingly kind of took it because she offered it. And it was from there that God kind of put it on my heart to do something. I said, "Hey, is there supposed to be, I'm a professional shooter. Is there something that I can do to help educate the people in this building that are making some egregious decisions, misinformed decisions?" And it was from there that it kind of born. I knew that I only had standing in the state I was in, so I was going to need friends. And then I realized that, women can be a little bit more impactful talking about the Second Amendment than people that look like yourself, traditional firearms enthusiasts, and women are the fastest growing demographics of gun owners. And we do support the Second Amendment, and we do want to be able to protect ourselves and our families.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's something intrinsically powerful about a woman who may not physically be able to, overcome an altercation, but can absolutely defend herself with her 9mm. Tell us about your messaging and how you train women not only to be comfortable with firearms, but be comfortable talking about the right to own and bear arms.
Right. Well, our messaging is that education is the key to firearms safety and violence prevention, not legislation, which you can see from our signature shirts. If your audience is not aware, the anti-gun lobby uses women's voices through Moms Demand Action, Giffords, and I just kind of watch how they behave. And and try to do what they do, except from a pro-gun messaging. So I really do honestly believe that we have the truth on our side, that disarming me is not going to make me any safer. And just push back that tide of demonizing guns and gun owners, because it really is, the Second Amendment really is that capstone to all of the amendments and all of our Constitution, because without it, you cannot protect any of the rest. Without it, we are only enslaved to the people who do have the power, and it's just such the fabric of our nation, and it really is the thing that should hold us together. It should not be a partisan issue. It is a constitutional issue. It's just that some of our citizenry is ready to sweep the Constitution under the rug. So that's what's concerning from my position.
Yeah, it is really important when you think about the right to bear arms really is the fundamental difference between a citizen and a serf or a slave. You see this going all the way back to the ancient Greeks and the Athenian democracy. The men who went to go fight the wars were the ones who had their own armor, their own weapons. They carried those into battle, and they decided when and where they were going to fight. It's no different than in 1776. And I've often thought it's a mistake for conservative and gun rights activists, usually they're smarter than this, to talk about the Second Amendment as the right to go hunting, for instance. Yeah, that's fine, but you're tapping into something a little more fundamental. Do you think women, you said that they're the fastest growing demographic for buying guns. Do they understand this, the ones that are going out and arming themselves?
Well, I think it's probably baby steps with, I recognize that the world is becoming more and more violent. I need to be able to protect myself. And then they start their journey of, maybe even understanding what the Second Amendment, or that the Second Amendment applies to them. So I think it's a journey. It's not necessarily a light switch. And that's where Women for Gun Rights is trying to give those women a chance to come in and understand civics and understand how politics works. We don't necessarily teach hands-on. We have a lot of people that are instructors, but that's not our gig. We're one of my board members owns a Girl and a Gun, which is the hands-on portion of training people how to use firearms and fundamentals. There's a lot of women-based groups out there, but we want to be able to teach people about the civics part of this and about how politics works and how that you may not want to do politics, but politics is definitely going to do you. And I think that, conservatives are actually kind of waking up to that, hey, I haven't been plugged in. I'm seeing too much and I'm hearing too much of these people that are willing to usurp the Constitution to get their way, and maybe I should start paying attention. So, for instance, there are up to 10 million gun owners that are not registered to vote, to vote. So if and not all those people really believe, and they have been manipulated by, I think it's an intentional, like I said, demonizing of guns and gun owners. So even people with R's behind their names, even people that consider themselves conservatives, have been influenced by these campaigns to make guns the bad guy and to make gun ownership. They might think it's okay for them. You heard it from Kamala Harris last week. I'm a gun owner. Nobody's coming for your guns, which is a complete blatant lie. We know that because 4 days later, she's ban assault weapons. But there are a lot of people right there in the middle who may be influenced by why do we need or why do we oppose universal background checks? Why do we oppose red flag laws? If your audience hears me say those words and they don't agree with opposing those things, we have a one-page document that goes over why we oppose universal background checks, why we oppose red flag laws, and educate our base as to how to have conversations with their friends, their families, and their neighbors. Because the antis are really have money behind them, and they have a lot of marketing tools. And we know that, marketing is a bazillion-dollar business because it works. People can be manipulated. And if that's all they hear is that guns are bad and we just want common sense gun control. Well, common sense gun control to me sounds like, those cities with the most violence, they should adopt the laws of the cities that don't have any violence instead of vice versa. Because
I like that.
That's common sense, but you have to back up and say, oh, okay, I'll look at it from that view, as opposed to just saying, every time there's a mass shooting saying, oh, well, universal background checks would solve that problem, because it's not. And, I refuse to outsource my security. Nothing is going to make me safer than preparing myself mentally, physically, and having a tool such as a firearm. Now, trying to make sure that crazy guy X doesn't get a gun and making all the laws to make me jump over all of those hoops so he doesn't get a gun doesn't make him any less violent, any less evil intent. He can still do whatever he wants to with a vehicle, with a knife, with a whatever. And it still doesn't make me any safer if I disarm. So I can't say that I want a law that is going to, that isn't going to make me any safer, is the bottom line. And so universal background checks, for your audience, I oppose them because they have to have a registry in order to be able to enforce that, a universal background check. Registries are illegal.
That's huge.
According to the Supreme Court. Yes, and they always lead to confiscations. So it depends on how much you want to trust your government to have that registry, and then at what point. It's always gone in that way. That's the last hurdle they need to clear before they can completely say, you have 10 guns, and if you don't turn in your 10 guns, you're going to go to jail. You're going to be the criminal. So that's why I oppose universal background checks.
If ever there was a time to make a case to the American people, and especially gun owners, that your government cannot be trusted and does not have your best interests at heart, I would think it would be in September 2024, where people are seeing, do you really want to surrender that much more information to this federal government that's made it very clear that at least one of the political parties is very interested in confiscating those firearms because they don't believe you have a fundamental right to carry arms. Dianna, I like something you said earlier about learning from the left in order to counter the left's tactics here. One of those things they do is they spread disinformation. Now, we don't spread disinformation. We counter that with facts, of course, which is what your point is. But they use a lot of terms like gun violence. You talked about red flag laws. this idea that they can manipulate the language in a way that scares people. Assault weapon bans, for instance. These are very calculated political terms. They don't refer to anything that's real. They're intended for political gain. What do you teach people when they hear that? What should they really be thinking? What should they be translating, in other words?
Well, that's the point, I guess, is that you need to, let's back up. As a Christian, if I do not go to church, if I do not hang out with Christians, if I do not read the Bible, if I do not pray, I am not a very effective witness for Christ. Same thing when it comes
Mm.
back up going to America. If you don't know anything about the Constitution, if you can't articulate why you think America is the greatest country in the world, um, down to the Second Amendment, if you don't spend any time reading the Second Amendment, if you don't understand the usual suspects, because they're all coming after the usual suspects, magazine capacity, safe storage, universal background checks, red flag laws, I can go on. But they're all in that one-page document that anybody's free to download, womenforgunrights.org. If you're going to go to an interview, if you're going to go to the Thanksgiving table and you need to refresh those things, that's what it's going to take, is for our choir to understand to really know the words to the song instead of just humming along and then getting tripped up when they actually have their little solo.
Let's talk a little bit about the ATF. This has really been, for anybody following the decline of gun rights over the last 4 years in the Harris-Biden administration, the ATF has really been the key government agency responsible for curtailing a lot of those rights. We were just discussing this earlier, some of my colleagues and I, about the horrible murder of Brian Malinowski. Not sure if you're familiar with the story, but Mr. Malinowski, of course, was in charge of the Bill Clinton Airport in Little Rock, Arkansas. He was an avid gun collector. He bought and sold guns at gun shows, and that got him flagged by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency as a possible illegal gun dealer, which of course he wasn't. He was an upstanding citizen. They had a morning raid on his house and gave him a very, very, very short window of time, I mean seconds of time, in order to open his door. The guy probably thought he was being mugged or burglarized, and they shot him dead. This is terrifying to people who buy guns with no ill intent. They're not terrorists. They're not selling weapons to terrorist organizations. They're just regular people. Does this look like some kind of state-sanctioned murder to people? Does this look like the actual Democratic position on firearms? What should we be worried about with this?
Well, I think that there's even a bigger worry. Like, it's not just the ATF; it's the DOJ, it's the FBI.
Yes.
I was a police officer for 22 years. I was appalled at the way the FBI conducted themselves and all of the investigations that were around Trump campaign and him coming into office. And now, you see Zuckerberg apologizing for, what was it, 51 military officials saying that the Hunter laptop was disinformation.
Yes.
And it's like, the American people that are paying attention, that have ears to hear and eyes to see, they recognize that you cannot trust what the mainstream media, you can't trust the government. They're seeing the government weaponized. I don't think it can be understated that how dangerous what we see is going on, and I think that is for intimidation for right now. I mean, look at what they did to J6 people, and what they continue to do. But we see what they let BLM get away with, and then we say January 6th seemed like a walk in the park, and you're still persecuting those people. So I think that it's a soft manipulation, intimidation of like, hey, gun owners, is it really worth? Do you really want to get killed? Do you really want to go to prison? Do you really want to get persecuted? And those people that are soft, there have been so many small business gun shops that have shut their doors because of the intimidation, and they make it so difficult that it's just not worth it to some people. So that, I think it's a death by 1,000 cuts. I'm definitely worried about it. And that's why I think Women for Gun Rights is so important, because like I said in the beginning, having somebody that's built like me, that looks like me, that has stories like me, and then all of the other women who have domestic violence stories, and we have horrendous survivor stories, that these women tell their stories and say, hey, this isn't just a white redneck dude issue. This is a any race, any sex, any creed, any neighborhood. issue. And we can really kind of normalize gun ownership again because we don't look like the scary bad guys that they have been able to demonize the traditional gun owner.
And buying and knowing how to use a weapon in self-defense does not make you a gun nut or a fanatic or anything, which I think the left has tried to paint people as, right?
Oh yeah, well, you see report after report of somebody being arrested with 3 firearms and 1,000 rounds, and I was like, my husband and I look at each other and we're like, that won't get us through the weekend. We shoot professionally. We go and we train, and that's not what they're just trying to normalize. Any kind of gun ownership, any kind of ammunition is bad. So we see it happening. I can see it happen as soon as what Venezuela was 15, 20 years ago, that they really went down this path and chose right kind of where we're at right now. I think November is that Venezuela 15, 20 years ago when they chose to go down the socialism, communism path. And if you learn from that, people would flock to the freedom and what we have had instead of what they say will be the utopia that we all know will be starving people and chaos and crime through the roof.
And many of the 10 million unregistered gun owners live in very important battleground states like Pennsylvania. And I wonder how many of them realize if Trump wins Georgia and Pennsylvania on top of everything he won in 2020, he clinches the election there. And there doesn't take that many more gun owners in these swing states to actually make a difference about who is going to be the president for the next 4+ years. This is a huge deal. Do you see people taking this seriously? Do you think that we're winning on this issue? And are people realizing, hey, I got to vote this November, otherwise I may not ever get the chance to do so again?
Well, it's interesting because it's really difficult to understand, how effective we are being at our messaging, because I can tell you, for one, I am severely censored anytime as a gun owner, anytime I have anything of me doing something lawful with my firearm, I get flagged on Instagram. I get put in jail. So my reach is completely minimized. But it's just hard to know exactly how effective we're being. And I think that this is the same thing we saw in 2020, or in 2016 when it was Hillary and Trump. Like, if you had listened to the polls and all the mainstream media, they bought it themselves, it's a landslide, Hillary's going to win in a landslide. And then lo and behold, they didn't. So it's really difficult to understand who to listen to. I have heard the beating of the drum of trying from the conservative side, trying to get people more interested in understanding how important their vote is and getting people registered to vote. Vote for America, vote the number 4 America.org is a big push from the conservative side of trying to just get people to register to vote. And like I said, I don't know that I finished my thought on the gun owners. So let's say you're a gun owner, but you don't necessarily believe in all of those things. So it doesn't mean that they're going to automatically vote for Trump. And I'll tell you this,
Sure.
Trump has not been good on our issue. I am not a Trump lover or cult. I recognize that his policies are what's best for America. And certainly from the Second Amendment space, he hasn't been great, but he's exponentially better than what the other side is presenting.
There's only one party in this election that actually does believe you have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, and that is the Republican Party. It comes down to that simple message right there. You have to vote like your lives and your rights depend on it, because frankly, they do. Dianna, where can people support your work?
Our website is womenforgunrights.org, and we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. I would love for everybody to take a follow there because, those numbers do make a difference. And help us just share our messaging, and they can go to that website, they can sign up, they can donate, they can share their story. So if there's any women here who have had, maybe you were previously an anti-person and what changed your mind, that story. Maybe you've been a victim of attack. Maybe you got to use your firearm to protect yourself.
Well, Dianna Muller, thank you so much for everything you do and coming on the show today. It's been lovely hearing from you.
Thanks for having me.
And let me thank you folks for tuning in, supporting conservative voices like Dianna's, working to expose the truth about the rot spreading through this once great country. Remember that it's only by working together and by praying together that we can restore the United States of America to greatness under Almighty and Sovereign God. I'm Hayden Ludwig. Join us next time as the battle rages on.
First Right, a new kind of news summary without the liberal slant. Every morning, in your inbox, always free. Subscribe by texting First Right to 30161. That's First Right, all caps, one word, to 30161.